Hey guys, welcome back. So in my previous 5 videos, I talked about 4 videos had wave riders and what those were all about, part of the economic wave. And then my last video, my 5th video, was about when those wave riders come in to shore and they kind of just sit on the beach and chill, right? Well, in this video, I think I forgot about how those waves are generated, okay? Now, if you think about an ocean, if you go to the ocean and there was no waves, it'd be pretty boring. It'd be a stagnant ocean. Like, I don't think people would want to go in. Like, they may not even want to swim in the ocean if it was stagnant and flat. It might get kind of stinky, right? So you got to have the ocean moving. And who's doing all the moving? Who's building the swells out in the middle of the ocean? These swells, when you're sitting on the beach, you don't really see these swells out in the middle of the ocean. You can't see them at all. They kind of look flat over the horizon, but they're there. They're out there, right? And the swells are basically a combination of things. They're the entrepreneurs, they're the small business owners, and they're private equity firms. And they're the workers that build these economic waves. All the workers that work for companies, they're building these swells. They're building up enough energy for these swells to be surfable, okay? Now, not every swell that you see in the ocean is even surfable. Some of these swells don't build up enough energy to crash over the reef, right? Like sometimes you'll be out there surfing and you'll see swells and you'll just float over them. They'll float under you and they'll move on, right? They don't have enough energy to build up and crash over the reef. There's got to be a lot of energy for that to happen. And so how does that happen? Let's talk about that. So let's say you're an entrepreneur and your goal is to build a company in a wave or a swell big enough so that a surfer can actually surf on it, right? These are big visionaries, big picture people, hustlers, people who are going to build a company up so big that it has enough energy to actually be surfable and to create the action. Everyone wants to see the action out in the ocean, right? Everyone wants to see the surfers. It's fun to watch, okay? So you got entrepreneurs that sometimes these swells, they grow organically, right? People just continue to hire, they continue to sell that business and grow that business organically. That happens. What's another way that a swell might build up? Well, sometimes companies merge. You'll see that on the ocean, like waves, they'll merge together. A swell will merge together and get bigger, right? And sometimes a storm happens and that happens, right? Companies come and go, businesses succeed and fail, and they merge sometimes, and so they get a little bigger, right? What's another way that they can get a little bit bigger? Well, you've got private equity firms. And what is that? That's a representation of a form of energy. A private equity firm has a lot of capital, and that's a lot of energy. And it's kind of an inorganic form or an inorganic way for a swell to build up. Just push a bunch of cash into that swell and it'll build up more energy, right? And so companies, they'll finance or they'll raise money, right? Like with a Series A, Series B, Series C and D. I'm not familiar with the private equity market, but it's there, right? Again, you don't see it a lot. You don't hear about it a lot, but it's happening out there. It's happening out in the middle of the ocean. You're sitting on the beach, you're not seeing it happen, but it's happening, right? And all of a sudden, that swell builds up so big that it finally, you see it out there. You're like, ooh, I see that swell coming. It's coming. The surfers see it. They're sitting there waiting, and they're waiting for that swell to come up, crash, and ride, right? And now what is that event called? Okay, when that wave builds up so much energy, enough energy to actually be surfable, it's called an IPO, an initial public offering. And that's when all the private investors and the company holders and the entrepreneurs they get what's called a liquidity event, an IPO. Now, they don't have to take the liquidity at an IPO. They can start to be the wave surfers as well. They can join the surfers. They're already part of the wave. They can just continue that wave and just surf it right into shore. Okay? But sometimes they sell out at IPO, and so do the private investors, the private equity firms. They sell out, they sell their shares to the public, the surfers, and they go on their way. They go and they build new swells after that, right? They build another swell. They're like, oh, I think I can build that swell. But again, you know, private equity firms, they have the risk. They can try to build up a swell big enough to get an IPO, but sometimes they fail, right? It's those waves, those swells you see that surfers, they just go up and down and they don't even try to catch them. They never go IPO. That happens. You see it, like I think one example was WeWork. WeWork was getting built up by private equity firms, and it was really big swell, but it never cracked open. It never crashed over the reef for surfers to surf. It failed. And that happens too, right? People lose a lot of money. The private equity firms, they lose all sorts of money all the time, right? They never can build up the swells. Now, some of these swells out there, you get a lot of little ripples in, right? Those are small businesses. They don't have the intentions of getting to an IPO. They're just not interested in that. They're just a little ripple in the swell, and they just ride the swell, right, along with the bigger companies, okay? So that's a little bit about the ocean in general. It has nothing to do with the surfers. It does at a certain point when a company goes IPO, but there's a lot going on in the middle of that ocean that you can be a part of, right? You can be part of building the swell, right? You probably are part of that swell. You're just a worker that's building up energy, right, as part of that, right? Maybe it's a private company. A lot of people work for private companies, and they're just part of these swells that are around the ocean, moving around. They haven't come to shore yet, right? Eventually, they're going to hit a reef, and they're going to crash over if they have enough energy, okay? Now, here's an interesting one. So we learned a little bit about how these swells build up, right? Well, sometimes you get an earthquake on the ocean floor, right? The ocean floor, it's huge. You get an earthquake, and those plates, they push against each other, and boom, you know, it comes up. And that's a tsunami in the ocean, right? What is a tsunami? It's a breakthrough. It's a breakthrough in a company, a technology, maybe a medicine, whatever it is. And what does that breakthrough do? It causes a tsunami, and that wave, oh, it's coming crashing, right? And you're going to get a few surfers that see that tsunami's coming and they catch it, right? And that's called a disruption in the economy. And these happen a few times throughout generations, these big disruptions. And what happens is that big tsunami comes through and it crashes, and it destroys a lot of other waves in the process, right? Sometimes it destroys cities. We've seen that happen in previous couple of years. And what is that? That's a disruption in the economy. It gets real messy, right? All the waves get eaten up, right? Businesses go out of business, and that wave comes through, and there's new businesses, right? Everything's fresh. Everything's got to be rebuilt. Maybe the town's got to be rebuilt. That beach is like destroyed, right? Some of those investors got pummeled even that were sitting on the beach. Let's say you rode your waves, right? Maybe you're still invested in the markets, and you're just sitting on the beach chilling, and all of a sudden some new tsunami comes and destroys your wave, and you're wiped out. That happens, right? It's few and far between. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens. So pay attention to those tsunamis. They're coming. They're going to come. You know, it's every maybe once a generation, but pay attention to that. So again, I just wanted to do another analogy of what's happening out in the ocean. There's stuff happening out there. You don't see it, right? Some of the people on boats, big boats, they kind of know what's going on. They're out in the ocean. They see the swells. They're building up, right? They see a storm. They ride through it. They see these big waves are building up. They're out there in the economy. You're part of it too. And, you know, it's just a good way for you to navigate the real world by thinking about the ocean, right? How do you want to navigate the world? Maybe you want to be part of private equity. Maybe you want to start a private equity firm. You know enough about it. Go to school, learn about that. You know, try to build up some capital, be part of that. Build a swell so that people can surf on it, okay? So anyways, I just thought it was an interesting thought I had. It was last night and this morning. I figured, man, let's share that. That's an interesting concept. Maybe people relate to that and understand that, right? They want to be part of that building the swell part. So anyways, if you guys could take a look at my previous video, and everyone have a great day. Thanks for coming. Bye.